There's an issue brewing nationwide around tax exemption for nonprofits that are also considered hate groups. Today's guest is an expert in tax exemption law, FAMU law professor Darrell Jones. Welcome to Legal Connections.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us what the criteria is for tax exemption for nonprofits.
Well, initially, the organization is typically a corporation, but it's organized historically. We get the American version of the law comes from Europe, from England. And it started out as something that was a group that was doing something good. And good was defined as either charitable, broadly defined, educational, or scientific.
Okay.
And as long as the group is collecting money but not distributing the money out to any particular individuals as if they had shareholders, they could qualify for tax exempt status. And the law of tax exempt status has pretty much been in the tax code since the beginning of the tax code.
Okay. And bring us up to speed with the current controversy.
Well, the controversy revolves around the definition really of educational. I mean, anything can be educational. And there are some groups who believe in racial supremacy or racial hatred, but they are sophisticated enough that they can sort of couch their rhetoric in the terms of educating. We're not really here to hate people. We're here to educate people on, for example, the differences in races and why. I mean, they're explicit in this regard, and why some races are more advanced than others.
Okay.
And as long as they claim educational status, they are entitled, or at least under current law, they're presumptively entitled to tax exempt status. Now, in more recent times, particularly since the rise of things like crimes like in Charlottesville and mass shootings, there's been a question about whether we should be granting tax exempt status to groups that are quote unquote hate groups.
Because we have to reference back to the word good,
Right,
that's the original intent.
Right, the original intent was for groups to do good things, but then the law changed almost to sort of a law and economics sort of conception where almost anything can be a good thing. I mean, you can have a group that all they do is sell Nike shoes at a discount, and as long as they're not distributing out the profit to the individuals who are running the organization, under a law and economics theory, they can be tax exempt. And I think that because we've drifted away from the common law definition of charity, now anything can be tax exempt. Now, there was a famous case, Bob Jones University versus United States, where Bob Jones University was a private university, and they still are, and they prohibited interracial dating. Okay. And they lost their tax exempt status because of that, because they prohibited interracial dating, and the Supreme Court held that racial discrimination is against public policy, and charity cannot involve something that's against clearly defined public policy. There's a few more cases where we've had sort of Ku Klux Klan type organizations seek tax exempt status, and they've lost, but those were lower court opinions.
So the issue then now I'm hearing is that with the first, how are we balancing First Amendment rights
Precisely.
with what the criteria is as it's defined under the law?
Right. There's this doctrine called unconstitutional conditions doctrine, which says that the Congress can grant benefits to whoever it wants to grant benefits to, but it can't condition those benefits on the recipient's agreement to waive a constitutional right. And so the hate groups are arguing that you can't deny us a benefit on the condition that we give up our right to free speech. And that's all we're doing. They're saying we're not advocating violence, but we are exercising our right to free speech.
Right.
Now, the research that I'm doing is trying, and there's lots of research out there, there's lots of data out there that supports the notion that hate speech is almost akin to yelling fire in a crowded theater. That is to say that it's something that so inevitably leads to violence that we can outlaw it, or we don't have to subsidize it. And a tax exemption really is the government giving a group money, because what they're saying is you're making a lot of money and you don't have to pay any taxes, so it's sort of a reverse subsidy.
Right.
And so, and under the unconstitutional conditions doctrine, the hate groups are saying, well, you can't deny us this benefit merely because you don't like what we're saying.
Right.
And so far, most scholars seem to think that that argument is going to fly. I happen to disagree. I think we can prove the inevitability of violence as a consequence of the type of hate speech that we see on TV. I mean, there was somebody in Germany just yesterday who tried to shoot up a synagogue.
Very complex issues. I just really want to thank you for coming on and sharing just the insight on that they're complex.
Difficult issue,
you know,
yes.
it's not, there's no easy answer to it.
Right.
I've learned so much about tax exemption as it pertains to these groups, and I'm sure you have as well.